Hey YouTube, this is Donald. Working on my 2005 Excursion. I'm upgrading the wheels to some larger OEM wheels from the later model trucks, and they require wheel spacers. And so I just want to give a quick review of the wheel spacers I got on eBay from a company called SDT, Street Dirt Track. They are 2-inch hub-centric wheel spacers. I've seen some stuff on the forums about the fitment on these and problems with the rear. So I just want to show basically what's going on with them. You can make them work. It does take a little bit of work to make them work, but I don't feel like it's that bad. So this is what they are. You can see it's 8x170, so that's your bolt spacing right there. 124.9 is the center bore. These are hub centric. You can see they've got the little lip here for the wheel to mate on. 14 by 1.5 is just your lug stud pitch, 2 inches long, and then there's your part number. I got these on eBay for $133 shipped. They're made out of aluminum. They're nice and light. As you can see, the studs appear to be decent. I don't know if that's going to pick up. They're 10.9 studs. They're grade 10 studs. The light on this is shining too much. So the issue with these going on the rear is actually inside here, because they're hub centric. You can see there's a little step on the inside. So the back, this portion back here, this is where it goes onto the hub and centers onto the axle itself. But on the inside here, let me flip this over. I'll try to get an angle. So on the inside, down here in the front, the inner diameter of these has to narrow. Hopefully you can kind of see what's going on here. All right, that inside diameter has to narrow in order to give you, on this outer surface right here where the wheel is going to center, in order for the outside diameter of this to be the same as the inside diameter back here, it's got to neck down. It's got to narrow to do it. That's unavoidable. So what happens on the back? Take a look at this axle real quick. So back here, this is where your wheel would center on the hub normally. In this case, the wheel spacer is going to be centering right there. Here's the outer part of the axle that bolts to the hub. This right here is nearly the same outer diameter as the axle bore back here. It's not exactly the same, but it's really, really close. It's almost the same. This right here, stands up a little bit taller than the fingers that you can see here on the hub. So this is a little bit taller than these. There's actually a lip up here where it goes bigger. So this is actually bigger back here than everything else, but not much bigger. So what's going on is the neck down that it does here necks down smaller than the diameter of this axle by a tiny amount. It actually necks down, I don't even know if I want to say it does neck down smaller than the diameter created by these little fingers, but it's a really, really, really tight fit, essentially. So to make these work, basically you just have to do a little bit of work on these fingers, and you pull the axle out. And the reason you got to do that, if you take a look here, right, if I line this up, you'll see that that axle is going to stick out further than the spacer itself. So you've got to, if you're going to slide this on all the way, then this inner diameter here has got to be big enough to accommodate all of this. And the way these are made, it simply isn't. It's big enough to accommodate these little finger sections back here with just a small touch-up, but it's not big enough to accommodate this axle, and actually where these bolts sometimes line up with the corner completely on the outside of the diameter here. This corner is actually sticking out a little bit further than this axle is, so that creates problems also. I think the other wheel spacers that you can get, there's a lot of talk about those. They're made out of steel. I'm sure the quality is great. The difference is they're $740, so you're looking at $600 more to not have to deal with them just not sliding on the back. without a little bit of work. So for me, that wasn't really worth it, because what you got to do is not that bad. These bolts here are 18 millimeter. You pull those bolts out. There's a little O-ring here. You just kind of pop against the backside of the axle. It'll pop out, pull it out. Not really a big deal. And then, I take my little whizzer here, with kind of a rough pad on it, okay? And then all I'm gonna do is basically take the paint off here and just smooth it. If you get in here and look, you'll see the casting has some imperfections. The metal has some texture to it. Really all I'm doing is just taking the texture off, and I'm pulling the paint back to about 1/2 inch back from the studs. And then that gives me enough room to clear the spacer, and then it just goes on. So what this will mean, though, is unless you actually open the spacer up to slide over everything, I didn't want to do that because it's aluminum. And the reason you have an issue here is just because where it necks down here, it's thicker than you would have to do with steel. With steel, you could open this up, it would be thinner, probably not really an issue. With aluminum, it's a problem. So, or in my opinion, with aluminum, it's a problem. So I don't want to take any material out of the aluminum here. I don't want to compromise the strength of this. So I'm going to take the room that I need off of this. Again, it's not any amount that you have to remove that amounts to anything, really. It's a pretty negligible amount of work that you have to do to get these on. What it does mean is that if for whatever reason, when you need to do rotors eventually later, once you take the axle out, put the spacer on, you put the axle back in, you're not going to be able to get the spacer back off past the axle. So if you need to get to the rotor, you've got to take the spacer off. Take the spacer off, you've got to take the axle out. So now a rotor job basically means you're pulling these 8 bolts, you're popping the axle out, and then you can pop the spacer and rotor off. In my opinion, with a full floating axle like this, not a big deal. These just go right out and go right in. That's what they're designed to do. That's the purpose of this design, is that it's not a big deal to pop an axle out and pop one back in. You can actually do it with the wheel on, with the weight on the ground and everything. Like, you don't have to take the tire off or anything to pull an axle. So in my opinion, not really a big deal. I know a lot of people don't like that, but it is what it is. So that's basically the deal with these spacers. You can get this, like I said, $133 shipped on eBay for these. And then that's the situation. You just have to do a little bit of work on this and pull the axle off. Or, you can spend $740, get the steel ones, and not have to worry about it. So it's just kind of, up to you if that $600 makes sense for you or not. So that's it.